Evil Dead Rise is a glorious showcase of makeup, prosthetics, and visual artistry of the insane. It is a modern masterpiece of carnage and gore. But despite it having a couple of moments of truly unbridled monstrosity and mayhem, and having a lead performance from its lead villainous Deadite that is truly spectacular and thrilling and chilling and just unbelievably captivating, this Evil Dead film, like the 2013 Evil Dead film, forgets one thing about Evil Dead that makes it Evil Dead, and that is the cheese. That campy, goofy, slapstick, silly, hilarious, cheesy vibe that the original Evil Dead films have. The Evil Dead franchise is one of the most iconic, fantastic horror franchises of all time. But it's not a horror franchise. It is a horror comedy franchise. And the comedy, for the most part, comes first. And this film, just like the 2013 film, is so self-serious and grim and dark and disgusting, and it's horribly violent, and it has all those kind of blood and guts and gore and carnage and all that stuff of the Evil Dead franchise. But when you lose the cheese, you're left with something that is kind of mean and brutal, and it doesn't have the same vibe. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. This is a perfect film for what it sets out to do, and that is a self-serious modern horror film. But you have taken the Evil Dead brand, and so for me, this film really frustrates and annoys me just in that it doesn't give me what I want from an Evil Dead movie. And that's the cheese, that's the fun, that's the goofy, silly insanity with horrific, monstrous elements, and that beautiful, chaotic combination of the two things that makes Evil Dead 2 one of, if not the greatest, old school 80s horror film of all time. It is essentially the best version of that. I would argue Peter Jackson's Brain Dead is kind of on equal footing, maybe better, but that's a video for another time. Evil Dead 2 and the Evil Dead franchise is one certain thing, and the modern Evil Dead films kind of forget what franchise they are remaking and rebooting and legacy sequeling-ish kind of, but not really. It really is just a remake as well. Like, it's just like beat for beat for beat, the same movie, but it's lost everything that makes Evil Dead Evil Dead. Where's the cheese? And I know what some of you are thinking. Why do we need cheese if there's a cheese grater scene? Why was that cheese grater scene like the main thing everyone was talking about? It was like the least horrific moment of so many gory, horrific moments. Why was the cheese grater scene the thing that stood out to people? Did people not watch the last 15 minutes? Which is so spectacular and insane and crazy and wild and horrific that the cheese grater scene, I almost forget it. The only reason I remember it's even in the film is because everybody and their dog and their grandmother was like, did you see the cheese grater bit? Now, I want to be clear. This film is very, very effective in what it tries to do and what it does do. The Deadites are horrific, especially our lead Deadite. I suppose I won't spoil who that is, but their performance is next level. It's amazing, it's chilling, it's upsetting. It really, really spoke to me on a just like, ooh, I don't like that, but I like that, but I don't, you know how you're like, oh, I hate that, but because it's so good. That's that performance. It's amazing. It carries the whole film. Really, really great. There are some truly fantastic sequences. I do think the last 15 minutes just goes so bonkers and does some really interesting and fun new stuff in the lore of the Necronomicon and the Deadites and all that crazy Evil Dead stuff, which I found really fun and interesting. Although it's kind of funny because you're like, is that more effective than what was happening before? It feels like, and if you've seen the movie, you know, it's like it doesn't feel like that would be as effective because I'm watching you and it's not. But on just a visceral looking at something with my eyeballs, I was like, whoa, I like that. By making an Evil Dead movie, we can't get like another Evil Dead movie that's doing something else next week, like, or whenever. It's like, yes, they'll keep making Evil Dead films, and this does set up some other stuff, But because now this is the second movie in the kind of revamped modern take on the franchise, it really feels like to me they've put their feet in cement and kind of stuck down and gone, no, this franchise is modern and mean and brutal and there's no fun. Why would you have fun? It's gory and brutal and horrible. That's not Evil Dead. Why are you trying to do this? Like, you can do that for any other franchise. There are so many other franchises that kind of lend themselves to be kind of horribly shocking and brutal and harsh and kind of unforgiving and really just not fun. And I do understand this is a very personal preference. I want to see something cheesy and gory and silly and be more horror comedy because that's what Evil Dead is to me. But for some people, they like the idea of the lore and the Deadites and the Necronomicon and all this stuff, but maybe they don't want it to be cheesy and silly and dumb and have that B-grade vibe, which is what I love about the franchise. And so they're taking it and making it modern. All the makeup and prosthetics and visuals and the gore and this carnage, it is all top-notch. Like, it's maybe the most impressive on a practical level, like the makeup, the gore and all that stuff. It's maybe the most impressive thing I've seen in a Hollywood movie ever. Like, it's really, really impressive. I have no idea when it's CGI, when it's practical. It all feels real. And that is truly amazing. It is honestly spectacular. And I love that for this film. But it's so funny because I'm like, it's so impressive. And everyone who made this film should be so happy how convincing it all is. And the blend of everything. Like, when's there CGI? At some points there must be because of what I'm seeing, but I can't tell. And I've got to be honest though, something about Evil Dead, particularly Evil Dead 2, but 1 and 3 as well. Love them, love them, love them. It's got this kind of old school filmmaking style where you can kind of see the seams within scenes, and there'll be like a scene where there's like 3 different ways they've created this monster or this effect. And in each shot, it's different. And you can kind of see how they've done it. And like, oh, there's stop motion here. Oh, there's this. Oh, it's practical. Oh, there's... And you can kind of just go through all the different crazy ways they've had to present a scene to just get their vision on the screen. And it's cheap, it's dirty, and there's just so much passion and love and inventive creativity. And there's something so infectious and amazing about that. And I just find that the more and more better the visuals and the prosthetics and the makeup all get, I just kind of look at a movie now and I just go, yeah, well, I don't know. It's like it's just gotten so impressive that somehow I'm almost not as impressed, or it just doesn't have that same charm, that same kind of dirty backyard filming charm. And I know that's not fair, but for me, Evil Dead, when I think of Evil Dead, it invokes the reason that I fell into love with horror comedies and gore and practical effects. Like, Lord of the Rings will always be the film that made me love cinema. But underneath that, I think the second and third films that made me want to be a filmmaker was Evil Dead 2 and Peter Jackson's Brain Dead. And there's something so kind of beautiful and unique about how you can see how they've done it, and they didn't have the money and budget to make it all look perfect. But that makes it even more perfect because they still get across their story, they still get across their tone and their vibe, and it's just got something that's so beautifully of a time, of an era. And it's not even that nostalgic for me. Like, it's nostalgic for me, but this was when I was kind of, this isn't like a 7-year-old me being like, oh, like I was 15 to 18 when this really started to influence me. And there is just something where I can feel the filmmaker getting their hands dirty and really having to push every cent of a film. And I know, I've seen the budget of this film. They are doing that. But for me, personally, and this is just obviously personally, it's so impressive. Somehow I'm just not as impressed. I don't know, that's so bullshit. That's so unfair. I feel like I'm being super negative. I don't mean to be. I just find it kind of fascinating how the film is just trying to be this new, different thing. And by taking the IP of Evil Dead, I find it kind of frustrating because it's not what I find Evil Dead like. It's not what I find attractive about Evil Dead. It's not what kind of drew me to the franchise in the first place. One other thing, apart from the lead villain performance, everyone sucks, don't care about them, I want the villain to win. Unless the villain is as entertaining as, say, a Freddy Krueger, who's got a personality and a vibe, and you're like, oh, I just want to see him keep Freddy Kruegering all over the place. you don't want the villain to win, because then it's like, why do I care if they die? Why are there stakes? Why are there emotions? This film should have been called The Evil Dead Awakens rather than An Evil Dead Rise, because it's like, it's just the same movie. It's beat for beat for beat. Every single moment goes through, and until the last 15 minutes where it kind of just goes so crazy, it just feels so oddly derivative. And I'm not saying it's completely derivative in the worst ways. There are some fantastic little moments and glimmers of true brilliance. That moment at the start where we get the classic POV of the evil dead entity flying through the woods, and then it turns out that that is a shot from a drone. Honestly, that's inspired. That's genius. It's really, really, really fun and clever. Love that. That's what I want the whole film. I don't want that to be the best part of the film, the first minute of the film. Or also, actually, the title sequence, when the titles appear and it says Evil Dead Rise on the screen, next level genius. Brilliant, fantastic. Honestly, the whole first opening scene is spectacular. And then when we get introduced to the characters and you're like, oh. So in conclusion, The Evil Dead Awakens is technically a fantastic film, but it doesn't utilize the IP of Evil Dead in the way that I want, and so therefore for me, a mixed bag of a film.